Welcome back to Square Off. Now to the potential political fallout from Stephen Richer's defamation suit for both Kari Lake and Stephen Richer. Our political panel steps in. Jim Small, editor of the Arizona Mirror and a longtime Capitol journalist, and Tony Cani, former Biden campaign official in Arizona and consultant at Slingshot Campaigns. Welcome back to Square Off. Tony, it's kind of easy to make analogies between Kari Lake's situation and Donald Trump's legal troubles and maybe assume that she'll get the same halo effect that he's had from being in court for being punished. Do you think that's going to play out the same way here in this case?
I don't think that it will. And part of it's because she's trying so hard, at least outwardly, to pivot to the future. And this is yet another circumstance where she is talking about the past and talking about her insistence that her election was stolen. I mean, so much so that even though a court filing basically says, I admit it, I was lying, she still can't handle people saying she was wrong, so she goes on the radio and repeats these lies the day that that filing happened. And so she's going to be knocked off message constantly, and I think that it's going to hurt her in Arizona. I think people are just really tired of this.
And I think one of the more important points Tom Ryan gave us was this is going to drag on for months, and the primary, Jim, is on July 30th?
Yeah, it's at the end of July this year. And so that's kind of it, right? I mean, we're the primary maybe. We can discuss, I think, maybe a little bit later about how this is going to affect the primary election, but certainly she's the overwhelming favorite in the primary right now. And so I think the issue is less about how it's going to affect the primary and more about how it's going to continue sort of this narrative that Tony was talking about, you know, heading into kind of the teeth of the election, into the late summer, into the general election against, you know, ostensibly Ruben Gallego. You know, and the fact that for all of the talk that she's had, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 times we've now had her say, well, I'm not talking about the past, I'm going to look to the future, we're only going to talk about the future. And whether, you know, this one is going to force her to talk about the past, but certainly she's shown, I think, a reluctance to be able to kind of stick with that message discipline already. I think usually it lasts about 36 or 48 hours, and then we're right back onto, you know, a Steve Bannon show or some other podcast or some other radio show where we're talking about, you know, the ills and horrors of 2020 and 2022.
One of the more interesting recent developments, and I'm not sure what to make of it is, but she's not winning back the mainstream Republicans she says are coming back to her. But now you're seeing some of the more hardcore Lake supporters, the base, the real current Trump base saying, you know, I'm not sure about this. What should we make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is interesting. I think that there was it the Washington Post or the New York Times had a big story looking at, the New York Times looking at the race, and a lot of, you know, folks who would have been, you know, I think firmly in Kari's camp in 2022 who aren't, and they're lining up behind Pinal County Sheriff Mark Lamb. We'll see whether that is able to translate into anything. You know, I think certainly these legal problems aren't going to help her in that regard, you know, but I think that some of those overtures she's made toward the middle to try to, you know, apologize to the McCains and things like that, I think leaves a bad taste in the mouth of people who have, you know, spent really the last 20 years fighting the Republican establishment and trying to drive them out of the party.
Mark Lamb is definitely not the favorite in the primary, but if you were him right now, what would you be doing? Because I don't think he's doing it.
I think I'd focus on 2 things. I'd focus on the fact that Kari Lake said she was going to use she was going to use this to prove all of the election fraud, go after all the people in Maricopa County. She was going to do discovery. She was raising money to get people to, you know, go out and find this stuff. So I think I would focus on that. The other thing I would talk about out of this is she's going on the radio and saying, you know, this is about free speech. And now, as a mom, you're not going to be able to go to a school board meeting and you're not going to be able to criticize the school board, which is not true. But if she believes that, why isn't she fighting this? So basically what she's saying is, I'm never going to surrender except for all the times that I'm going to surrender. That's basically what she's saying. And I would probably continue to focus on that and be like, can we get past the drama? Because I do think even a lot of the Republicans are just exhausted with the drama.
That does appear to be an issue. What about Stephen Richer? He's running in a pretty crowded Republican primary himself. One of his opponents, State Representative Justin Heap, is a Lake ally. What are the risks for Richer in pursuing this case?
I think the fact that they're going to avoid trial and, you know, really, we're now into, as Tom was talking in the last segment, into the kind of that one-sided discovery. I mean, I think that really mitigates a lot of potential political risks for Stephen Richer in doing this. And you know, everything that's going to come out, I think, is largely going to be things that are going to bolster his position and kind of reinforce the idea, you know, of what he's been saying, what he said in the lawsuit, what he's been saying for the past 2 years, which is basically, this is all malarkey. It's all made up, and it's designed to, A, make me look bad, and B, undercut democracy in Arizona. And those, I think, are kind of his core message. That's one of his, I think his core kind of platform is the importance of elections, and in well-run elections, and in what it means for Arizonans writ large, and democracy in general.
Tony, real quick, could this be an asset for Stephen Richer in the primary?
I think maybe it can be. I think we're going to really get a good sense of how in control Trump is in Maricopa County out of this, because he doesn't have much name ID. He's never raised money before. He's going to have the Turning Point people basically running his campaign.
Justin Heap.
Justin Heap, the opponent in the primary. And Richer has very high name ID. He's out in the media all the time, and he's raised money. And so he is going to be in a strong position to win. If he doesn't, it's just going to show how completely in control right now Trump is of the Republican Party.
Got to end it there. Jim Small, Tony Cani, thank you so much for joining us.